Alex. It is lovely to have you here.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So I learned about you because we have a mutual person in common, Elsie Hewitt, who has been really courageous with her journey. And she shared it here with EndoTV and with you at People, where you work as a staff writer. And I started following you and I was like, oh my gosh, she is an endo warrior. She is one of us. And I had to ask you, are you comfortable coming on and sharing your journey? And you have done so with People magazine, and that is always a courageous thing. I think people sometimes assume like, oh, well, they work in media, they must be open with their struggles. And no, it takes so much, especially in a world where everyone's got an opinion on everything. So thank you for being here and for talking with us today.
Thank you. That's so kind. And no, of course I knew it was something I wanted to share, and I was honored that, the brand I work for was supportive of it, but I was still absolutely nervous. Like, it's vulnerable to have to talk about basically like what your insides, and that's part of the problem too. Like, not everybody wants to talk about it because it can be uncomfortable and there can be a stigma. And so I figured, all right, like if me talking about it can help even the smallest bit, let's do it. It's worth the initial apprehension, right?
Before you decided to write about it, because you and I are both writers. I know for me with my personal journey, it took me over a year to want to share. It wasn't until someone said to me like, oh, you might be able to help people if you do this. And I was like, oh, that's like it's a big leap. What was the moment for you where you were like, I've got to pay it forward in some way. I've got to help people understand this disease?
That's a really great question. I am fortunate that in the job that I have, a lot of times, right, I'm sitting down with people and the whole point of the conversation is that they're sharing something really personal or really vulnerable. And two of my biggest role models, I love Savannah Guthrie. She's the reason I became a journalist. And I have sat down and had a really personal conversation with her. She sort of opened up about her faith. She wrote this book. And I read the book as I was prepping for surgery. And so I felt like, okay, if she can sort of get vulnerable, like you don't see a news anchor really talking about faith a lot. And it was just something that I sort of was like, okay, if she can put that out there, surely I can put this out there. And I love Mariska Hargitay, is one of my favorite actresses. I've interviewed her a handful of times. And I've been in the room when she's sat down to share really personal things. And so I sort of looked around at like all of these women I admire. And while they don't have endometriosis, they're still opening up about things that are scary. And it makes me feel closer to them. It makes our readers feel closer to them. And it ultimately, that's how you get the story out. That's how, in our case too, like you spread awareness. So I sort of was like, all right, it's my turn to sort of do this.
When you started experiencing symptoms, did you have any knowledge about endometriosis? Were you aware that this, I think everybody kind of has a different way of getting there. Some people had it in their families and knew about it. Some people never heard about it before. They never knew the word. What was your experience with it?
I had heard of it. I say all the time, like as a journalist, we know a little bit about a lot of things. So I had heard of it, right? I was like, yes, that is not a word that I don't know. I didn't know much about it. I knew it involved painful period cramps is pretty much all that I knew. Mm-hmm. And 2 years prior to me getting the diagnosis, I was at a regular checkup with my gynecologist, and I had said, I know I'm on hormonal birth control, but I've been having cramps sort of all the time. And that wasn't out of the ordinary for me. I had experienced that in high school prior to going on the pill, but it had come back sort of with a vengeance. And she was sort of like, that automatically makes me think endometriosis. And I said, no, I don't have that. No, that's definitely not me. And she was kind of like, okay, if you say so. And go figure, like she was right. Had I not been so afraid of that word and what I did or didn't think it meant, maybe I would have been diagnosed even sooner.
I understand you not wanting to have the disease.
Yeah.
I totally get the rejection of what really can be an a life-altering diagnosis. And for so many of us, it is. I mean, and you and I were talking before, like, there is no cure for endometriosis. There are treatments, varieties of treatments, and surgery, excision surgery is still considered the gold standard, but it's not something that anyone's like, oh, yay, sign me up for, going under for hours, getting 6 to 8 weeks of my life taken away and having to heal. None of this is fun or easy. There is no single solution, and it is a chronic disease. And it is not, for many of us, it's not bad period cramps. It can have very serious implications. It is the leading cause of infertility. There's a lot of severe consequences that can come with it as well, in terms of severe endo, when it gets to be about stage 4, deep infiltrating endometriosis. We're learning more from medical studies that endometriosis also has deep infiltrating stage 4 endometriomas that are recurrent. There's a 9 times the risk for those with endometriosis to potentially develop ovarian cancer, which could be fatal. So, it is a serious disease that deserves serious, continuous discussions that are brought into the light, like the ones that you are having, that now we are getting to have together. And for you, when were you like, was that doctor onto something? Maybe I do have this.
Yeah. So not only, right, was I having period cramps that were beyond painful, but again, like, as many of us have been raised to or socialized to think that that's normal, I was like, okay, this is how everybody feels. So that wasn't even necessarily a red flag. But on top of that, I started having digestive issues that I had never really had before. I've always had a sensitive stomach my whole life, but this was to the point where I felt like I wasn't digesting my food. Everything made me bloated. I had, just the myriad of digestive issues that you could have, I had. And I started going to, as one might do, right, GI doctors. And everybody was like, I think it's just IBS. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's stress. And I was like, no, I'm definitely anxious and stressed, but I don't think that's the problem here,
especially now, right? You're going through this medical mystery.
Yeah. And it's sort of one thing, all the symptoms piled up to a point where, like, I would get up to go to work in the morning, and for the better part of a year, I was sick to my stomach. I was bloated. I was nauseous. Nausea remains one of the symptoms that I really still have to navigate. It's a lot better now that I've had the excision surgery, but it's still like I go down hard, and no one wants to be nauseous. And knowing that I was going to wake up every day and feel that way and still have to go try and live my life and do my job, I was like, something's wrong here, and I have to figure out what it is.
Yeah. And once you did do that, what were the steps that were taken?
That same gynecologist, she's wonderful, and she's the reason why I got a diagnosis as quickly as I did, relatively speaking. And I went to see her, and I sat down, and actually she sat me down, and she was like, I think we have something we need to talk about. And I was kind of like, okay, what could that mean? She was like, I think based on the fact that you have all of these digestive problems, you have these horrible debilitating period cramps, you have general other sort of gynecological discomfort across the board. She was like, and famously, like you do have a lot of anxiety. I was like, yes, I do. She's like, I think you might have endometriosis. And again, I was fortunate. She's happens to be, and I say happens to be, like, I did not seek her out because she was an endometriosis specialist, that she was certified to do excision surgery. That was totally like an invisible string. I was very, very lucky that she knew what to look for, and that is sort of her niche. I started seeing her because she was my mom's gynecologist. Like, that's how I found her.
Yeah.
And I trusted her. And when she said that, I had two thoughts. I was kind of like, okay, at least it's not any of the other scary things I had been worried about. I was jumping to, like, do I have colon cancer? Like, God only knows.
Yeah, totally.
Thankfully, no. But then the second thought I had was, what does this mean for my fertility? Which was kind of why when she brought that up initially 2 years ago, I was like, no, I don't have that. No, that's fine. Everything's fine. And so that was, and I still struggle with that today. Like it worries me immensely because I've always wanted to be a journalist and I've always wanted to be a mom. So the fact that one of those things like might hang in the balance really is frightening.
The one thing I'll try to say just from personal experience, because that hits home with me, when I did I think early diagnosis is so key. And that goes back to the whole having these conversations so that someone else watching might be like, oh, wait a minute. So this isn't just how it is for everybody with their periods, or this isn't how, I thought I just had bad stomach aches and there could be something more to this. Because I do think that we know a couple of things. We know that endometriosis can be progressive. We know that it can diminish our egg reserve. So getting a diagnosis in your teens or in your 20s can be fertility saving because there are options, right? Like we know that there's things that you can do. For me, I found out I had the AMH, which is the anti-Müllerian hormone. That is a simple blood test that you can get at a lab. When they suspected endometriosis when I was just turning 32, and again, had periods that were like horrible and ovarian cyst ruptures. Not a single doctor mentioned endometriosis. And I was 11 at my first menstrual cycle. Wow. Not a single one. So I just thought it was normal too. Pain was normalized. It was just what we did. No one in my family had periods like mine. So it was just, I was the outlier. And being 32 and the doctor saying, I kind of think, we had to check your fertility. And I was like, what? I'm fine. Right. I'm fine. Right. So they did that. And she's like, well, we're going to have to schedule you for a surgery. I know some surgeons. And are you sitting down? And it was like, what? Are you sitting down? Because you have the egg reserve based on your AMH of 0.007, which is literally a woman who is like in her 50s, who is menopausal. And I still have the piece of paper because I wrote down with the Sharpie the number because I was taking my notes. And I was like, what does this mean? Like, what does this mean? She's like, well, it means you can't get naturally pregnant. And it means that you're going to have to do IVF. But let's not even worry about that. Like, let's just focus on getting you better and out of pain. And all I was tripped up on was, I'm not going to be mom. I'm not going to be mom. I'm not going to be mom. Like, it was horrible. So I was like, okay. And they're like, first things first. So, I was fortunate enough to have the means to do fertility treatments because I know many people are not, and it is incredibly expensive. Healthcare system sucks. It's getting better. But at the time, everything was out of pocket. And I am so fortunate for my diagnosis and for that doctor to be like, you know what, let's do this test. Because if we didn't do it and I just had the surgery, I would not have had my son. And I am one of the very, very fortunate ones. Now my son is 7. But when I tell you, like, I was aggressive, like I was like, okay, surgery now, egg retrieval this way, it was like, I was going to try hell or high water to have this baby. And if someone told me, because I was like, how far do I take this? And they said, you take it as far as you can. You do everything you can to have your biological child. And if it doesn't work out, and, I do have faith, I do believe. And she told me, she's like, then God has another plan for you. And you're going to have that child that's going to choose you, and you're going to get to be a mom. And that stayed with me because it was my life's goal to be a mom. And I wasn't going to let any disease take that from me. So the reason I'm telling you is I want you to carry that you have options and that you are someone I can tell goes after what she wants and gets it.
I have been known to do that.
So I have no fear for you that you will have all those dreams come true for yourself. But yeah, it's a real, endometriosis is a real pain in the what.
Yes, it is. It's a pain in the uterus is what it is, and elsewhere. My God, it's a pain across the board.
Yeah, well said, Alex. Stitching. Yeah, so now that you have all this information, your excision surgery went well. Are you comfortable sharing, like, what did they find when they went in there? What was causing all the bowel issues?
Yeah, they found I had adhesions in my sort of just all around my pelvic cavity. I was fortunate that I didn't have any ovarian cysts on my ovaries or my fallopian tubes, which was, I was really worried about that. So I was glad that there was nothing there yet. God only knows what the future holds. But as of, January, when I was in there and they were rooting around, like, that was good. But pretty much everywhere else, pelvic cavity, all in my bowel. This specific, like, none of my organs were adhered together, which was also something I was worried about. So generally coming out of it, I was like, okay. And it's funny too, like, I've talked to Elsie and I've read stories of, other women who have this. And so often people are scared they're not going to find anything when they go in to have this surgery, right? And that they're going to be back at square one.
And they're going to go crazy.
Yeah. And then, right. You're back to, like, it's a total messes with your mind. And I do feel lucky because going into it, I had it, like, I knew. I was like, this is 100% what it is. Looking back, like, the way I felt growing up, sort of everything clicked into place for me. And I trusted my doctor. So I knew they were going to find something. But I'll tell you, even still, the first thing, I am coming out of the anesthesia, they're, like, wheeling me into recovery. And I saw my gynecologist, my surgeon, and I was like, did you find it? I still asked, did you find it? And she was like, we found it and we got it out. And I was relieved. I was still scared because, okay, she found it, but at that point I didn't know what she found or how much or, what it was. And even after the fact, to then look at the photos they take and to see, like, the pinpricks of tissue, and to be like, number one, that's what was inside me that's not supposed to be there. And number two, like, this is why I'm in all that pain. I'm sure it's a whole host of emotions. You're like, this is validating. This is frustrating. This is, why don't we know more about this? Like, it went, I think, as well as it could have gone, but it sort of was just the beginning of this journey.
Yeah. No, and I hope this is the end of your journey, because I don't want you to have more pain and more struggles. I mean, there are always those stories. People have one surgery and they're good. And I hope that's your journey. Cause it's not any disease that I would wish for anyone. I don't think anyone wishes any disease on anyone, but this one is incredibly, mysterious and complex and still not understood. And that's why we're just so fortunate for the researchers and the doctors who are dedicating their lives to this. For you, as someone who recently diagnosed, recently underwent surgery, what is your advice to those that are watching us right now that are feeling a sense of despair, confusion, and being alone?
Yeah. First of all, you're not alone. I've learned that through this experience, but also, again, through my job. Like, you're never alone. And that's another reason why talking about it, I think, is so important, because sometimes you just have to see someone do it first, right? And I'm not saying, like, I'm obviously not the first person to ever have endometriosis or to have surgery, but sometimes you just have to see someone do it and be like, okay, if they can do it, maybe so can I. And I think I was so afraid. I'd never had surgery before. Like, the, most invasive procedure I had ever had done prior to this was I had my wisdom teeth taken out when I was, like, a senior in high school. And I'd never, hadn't had surgery, was scared, didn't know what recovery was going to look like. And I have I live in New York City. I am constantly running all over the place to do this, that, and the other thing, as are, so many people. Like, you can't necessarily just stop your life, but sometimes you have to. Sometimes you don't have a choice. So I was worried about what the recovery would look like. And I was scouring Reddit threads, TikToks, whatever I could find out there to sort of see what I was in for. Because I think that's sort of another thing that messes with your mind, right? Before you go in to have surgery, you don't even know for sure that you have endo. And two, to what degree, like what are they going to find in there? No one knows until they get inside you. So it was hard. And that was the thing I kept asking my doctor. I was like, how long am I going to be out of work? How long am I going to be in pain after the surgery? Like, how long am I going to be in bed? Like, what does this look like? And it was sort of we're sort of going to have to wait and see. Like, I can't really give you a definitive answer, which was freaky. And one of the other driving reasons why I wanted to open up about it in people, like 2 months after I had the surgery, pretty quickly after, I wanted other people to know that like there is a world in which the surgery goes well and they find it and they take it out, they excise it, and then recovery is not as horrible as you've maybe made it out to be inside your head. It's not fun. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I did it. And it really was not as bad as I had been fearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good advice. And I'm happy that you are someone who is telling your story and is empowering other people to not only talk about endo, but also just to face the hard things, to face the things that people feel like they might be judged for, or they might be seen as weak. I always think that endometriosis like really strengthens you. It can make you feel really vulnerable, really weak, really all those fragile things. But in order to even get a diagnosis, you have to be a fighter.
You do.
And to go through the surgery, you have to be a warrior. And to, just have any kind of chronic disease requires a lot of resilience and a lot of grit. And when I meet members of our community, they all have those traits. And it has been a privilege speaking with you and for taking the time to share your story with us.
Thank you for having me on. Like I said, I'm now 11 months, right? It's almost November post-surgery, and I'm still learning. I do still feel like this is the beginning, but to have the diagnosis and to have the knowledge is, I think, where the power comes in, for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. The diagnosis is definitely part of like the knowledge is power. And if it makes you feel any better, I was diagnosed in 2016, and I still feel like I'm learning and learning and learning. And like, it's not even the tip of the iceberg. It's just one of those diseases where there's just so much to be done. So we need our entire army.
Yeah, we do. But that's another thing too. Like there is an army of us out there. And I think that's been really helpful to me too.
For sure. All right. Well, I hope you continue to feel better and feel well.
You too.
Thank you. And thank you for your work.
Thank you for yours. I mean, please, thanks for having me on. This is the work you do, and giving all of us a platform to share our stories is, like I said, that's half the battle right there, truly. So thank you.